Artificer Infusions are basically like enchantments, but the Artificer class is able to put them on pieces of equipment in order to give them magical properties, which they can then use themselves or hand out to other party members. In this list, we'll be going over some of the best Artificer Infusions that they can pick. Starting off at number 10, we have Replicate Magic Item, Bag of Holding. One of the things an Artificer can use its infusion for is to just replicate a normal magic item. However, it gives you a list of specific ones you're allowed to choose from, rather than letting you pick any magic item in the game, which is a good thing because magic items are definitely not very balanced for their rarities. And one of the best magic items you can pick up at level 2 when you get the infusions is the Bag of Holding. Mainly because the Bag of Holding is just an incredibly useful tool to have as early in the game as possible, because it allows you to largely ignore the management of your bag mechanic, and also just makes things a lot smoother for most adventuring parties. As the Bag of Holding is an item that can hold roughly up to 500 pounds of content, just as long as it fits within its 2-foot diameter mouth and doesn't exceed 4 feet in length. It allows you to put a whole bunch of stuff in there before it gets full. So much in fact that as long as you're not trying to move large quantities of objects to the Bag of Holding, you can kind of just ignore the mechanics of what you actually have in there most of the time. But just remember, if you're trying to keep weapons or anything like that in there, taking anything out of the Bag of Holding does require a full action, so it can't hold literally everything. There is also a chance it can break, where all the contents inside of the Bag of Holding are scattered across the astral plane. And if you place a Bag of Holding inside another Bag of Holding or something similar, it causes an explosion, which opens up a gate to the astral plane, sending everyone within 10 feet of it to random locations inside the astral plane. So there's definitely some risk when having a Bag of Holding. But for the most part, it's just a really good magic item to have. So obviously being able to get one in any campaign, as long as you're playing an Artificer, is pretty valuable, especially if you're playing in a low magic game. And at number 9, we have the Homunculus Servant, which is available from a 2nd level infusion. The Homunculus Servant is kind of like a Find Familiar spell creature, where it gives you a small little ally that can assist you in combat, and can also perform some scouting for you. And one of the advantages of Homunculus over a Familiar is that it can use its action in combat without any kind of problems, just as long as you use your bonus action in order to command it. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but if you're not using your bonus action for anything, it is extra damage nonetheless. And also, having a little creature you can command on the battlefield does give you some kind of advantages, especially if you're using the flanking rules. But the Homunculus is kind of weak, so you don't want to keep it in melee range for too long, otherwise it'll get destroyed pretty easily. While Homunculus might not be one of the best infusions to take for increasing the power level of your character, it is definitely useful to have a mechanical creature that you can use for a wide variety of creative purposes, that can also help you in battle if you so wish. And at number 8, we have Replicate Magic Item, Gauntlets of Ogre Power, and the Headband of Intellect. You can create both of these items once you hit level 10, and what these items do is either grant you 19 Strength with the Gauntlets of Ogre Power, or 19 Intellect with the Headband of Intellect. And being able to get near max stats in either of those things due to a magic item is really good, because it's basically a +4 in both of those kinds of stats, which is a huge bonus to get on a whole bunch of skills if you previously didn't have any bonus to either of them. The reason I group these up together is because they both kinda do the same thing, just for 2 niche stats. And the only problem with creating either of these items is that you only have access to creating these items once you hit the 10th level. And once you hit that level, most players who want to have Strength or Intellect might already have them maxed out or near maxed out, where it could be one of these items won't provide much of a benefit. So, at most, you would be giving them to someone who probably didn't have one of these 2 stats with any points in them at all, where they weren't really using them anyway, so it's not a big deal if they all of a sudden become 19 in those stats. But it is still good nonetheless. If you got access to either of these 2 items at an earlier level, this would be an amazing item to replicate. But it's a little bit too late at level 10, but definitely should still be mentioned as an option, just in case you want your Barbarian to be really smart or something, or if you're an Artificer and you really want to have 19 Strength for whatever reason. And at number 7, we have Enhanced Arcane Focus. This is an infusion which turns a rod, staff, or non-magical wand into an item which grants a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls, in addition to allowing them to ignore half cover when making a spell attack. And when you hit 10th level, this is increased to a +2. Now, being able to grant a universal +1 bonus to your spell attack rolls is kind of hard to come by, and being able to give this to just anyone in your party is going to be a pretty decent boost to their accuracy. It's much easier to get a +1 to a weapon than it is to get a +1 to a spell attack bonus, just to give a little bit of a comparison of how strong this actually is. And some Artificer subclasses actually use spells to attack too, where this would be useful for the Artificers themselves, but it's definitely more useful to give to one of your friendly spellcasters. And at number 6, we have Replicate Magic Item, Cloak of Elvenkind. This is an item that you can create when you hit the 6th level, and it's an uncommon hood, where the person who's using it has advantage on stealth checks to hide as long as you're wearing the hood, and also perception checks made to see you are done at disadvantage. So here's what's really good about this cloak. When you're performing a stealth check, the DC you're trying to beat is your enemy's passive perception. And the cloak also gives them disadvantage on sight-based perception checks, which means sometimes they'll be taking a -5 to their passive perception scores, while you're still getting advantage on your stealth roll. This makes sneaking way easier, to the point where you might be harder to find than if you were invisible in some circumstances. And there are a lot of circumstances in campaigns where you want to sneak around, so being able to gain guaranteed access to this item is really powerful, if you're able to give it to one of your stealthy characters for some kind of secret mission. And at number 5, we have Repeating Shot. This is a 2nd level infusion, which basically allows you to perform the extra attack feature with weapons that have the loading property. Normally, if you want to use a crossbow, which is one of the highest damage die of ranged weapons, the limiting factor behind crossbows is the fact that you can only use them once per turn, because of their loading property, which specifically states that you can only fire one piece of ammunition from this as an attack, bonus action, or reaction, regardless of the number of attacks you can normally make. But with Repeating Shot, you can just do it anyway, because it creates magical ammunition that is fired from the weapon and disappears after it lands or misses, in addition to having a +1 bonus to its attack and damage rolls, granting more accuracy and damage to the weapon as well. Repeating Shot is one of the few ways in the game to actually perform the extra attack feature with the heavy crossbow, which has a D10 of damage. And since remember, you can just give this item to another party member, if you have someone in your party who would really like to have the highest damage die possible on your ranged weapon, and it has the extra attack feature, this is an excellent item to give to one of your ranged party members. Of course, it's just good to use on your own as well if you want to use a weapon from far away. And at number 4, we have Resistant Armor. This is a 6th level infusion which requires you to use it on a suit of armor that allows you to grant any creature who wears the armor resistance to a damage of your choice. Now, there is a specific amount of resistances you can pick from, which I'll be showing on screen, which is basically all the resistances in the game, including the ever-important resistant to radiant, psychic, and necrotic damage, some of the hardest types of damage to gain a resistance of. It also lets you get much of the common resistances too. So if you're in a campaign like Descent into Avernus, where there's tons of fire damage, this could basically cut all the damage you take in half. Or if you're in something like Icewind Dale, which is in the cold north, taking cold resistance gives you all kinds of advantages in that campaign, as well as taking half damage from a majority of creatures. Or if you're playing a Totem Barbarian which has resistance to all types of damage except Psychic, well, if you give them this with Psychic chosen, then they have resistance to everything. Being able to pick and choose which resistances you have at all times is pretty powerful. And at number 3, we have the Helm of Awareness. This is a 10th level infusion which allows you to enchant a helmet to grant the creature who wears it advantage on their initiative rolls, in addition to making it so they can't be surprised unless they're incapacitated. Now, being able to have advantage on initiative rolls is almost impossible to come by in a normal game, and it's a very important role that you'd want to be able to have advantage on, because it can kind of decide the game if you give the Helm of Awareness to one of the casters that has a really good AoE spell, because they can control the battlefield before anyone gets a chance to act, which would normally be hard for them to do because most casters don't have good dexterity scores, and as such, not very high initiatives. But a simple Helm of Awareness kind of rectifies the problems by giving them advantage, which on average gives them a +5 bonus to those rolls. Or you can just keep this for yourself and go earlier in combat than normal, which is always a benefit to go sooner in combat rather than at the end of the turn order. And purely because of how hard it is to get advantage on initiative rolls, that's what places it at such a high spot on this list. And at number 2, we have Replicate Magic Item, Winged Boots. At 10th level, you have the ability to replicate a couple of uncommon magic items, which you've already talked about a couple of them earlier on this list. But out of all the ones you're allowed to pick, the Winged Boots are easily the best. Winged Boots are just some of the best magic items in the game, that are even useful in epic tier levels of play, where a level 20 character even wants a pair of Winged Boots because of the fly speed it provides. A vast majority of the monster manual cannot attack a creature that's flying, so it essentially gives you immunity to almost half of the monsters in the manual, as long as you have some kind of ranged attack to take advantage of the fly speed. And fly speed is also useful for breaking a whole bunch of encounters, because a lot of modules don't really balance around the notion that you're able to fly. So because of the power of just the Winged Boots, being the best uncommon magic item in the game, and being better than a lot of legendary items even, of course, the ability to replicate the Winged Boots is going to be fairly high on this list. And the other reason I don't have it at number 1 is because I just didn't want to just have a magic item number 1 spot on this list. I wanted to actually pick one of the actual infusions. And at number 1, we have Enhanced Defense. This is a rather simple 2nd level infusion which simply allows you to enchant a suit of armor or shield, in order to make it so the creature wearing that piece of equipment has a +1 bonus to their AC, which turns into a +2 bonus when you reach level 10. Now, just like obtaining advantage on initiative, getting an unconditional extra +1 bonus to your AC is really hard to come by, especially since a lot of AC bonuses don't stack with each other. But Enhanced Defense stacks on top of pretty much everything, while also not requiring an attunement, especially since you're able to pick this at such an early level. Enhanced Defense is easily one of the best infusions you can put on your armor right away, or on your frontline bruiser. An unconditional +1 to your AC is just so good that it would be kind of broken if you could place this on everyone's pieces of equipment in your party. But luckily you're only limited to 1 Enhanced Defense per Artificer, as you can't create multiple Enhanced Defense items like you can create multiple Replicate Magic items. And because just getting a +1 to your AC is so good, there are 2 magic items you can create which are also incredibly valuable. At 10th level you have the option to create the Cloak of Protection, which grants you a +1 bonus to your AC in all of your saving throws, which is definitely better if you're just going for pure value of an item that gives you +1 bonuses. But the Cloak of Protection does require attunement to whoever wears it. At 14th level, you're also able to create the Ring of Protection through the Replicate Magic item feature, which also gives you a +1 bonus to your AC and does stack with Cloak of Protection and Enhanced Defense. So Artificers are able to get some really high levels of AC through their infusions, especially since there's another infusion which can only be cast on your shield called Repulsion Shield at 6th level, which allows you to enchant a shield to have a +1 bonus to its AC. But you need to be wielding the shield in order to gain this bonus, and it takes up an attunement slot, so it's not as useful as Enhanced Defense, which you can place on a piece of armor instead that you're much more likely to actually be wearing. And because Enhanced Defense is so good that it would be the best option to just give to everyone in your party if you could, it should take the #1 spot on this list, even if wing boots are technically just as excellent of an option to obtain. That just making that magic item is also an S tier use of your infusion. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other infusions that I may have missed that should have definitely been on this list? Or do you have ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.